How can someone who followed every step of the success playbook, education, skill building, hard work, global opportunity, still feel trapped and falling behind? Why some countries stay poor, even when their people do everything right? Imagine you're a 29-year-old software engineer living in a modest apartment in Buenos Aires, Argentina. You work remotely for a fast-growing tech startup in Silicon Valley. Your salary is paid in US dollars every 2 weeks, reliable, competitive, and far above the local average. You graduated from a solid university, spent years self-teaching advanced programming skills, Python, JavaScript frameworks, cloud computing, built a strong portfolio on GitHub, networked aggressively on LinkedIn, and beat out hundreds of applicants to land this global remote job. By all the usual measures of success in today's world, you've done everything right. Yet the reality inside your apartment tells a different story. Every month, basic expenses climb higher. A bag of groceries that cost 5,000 pesos last month now costs 6,500. Your landlord sends another rent increase notice. Even though your income is in dollars, the local cost of living keeps outpacing your purchasing power. Argentina's inflation rate, which once soared above 100% in crisis years, has eased but still runs at around 33% annually in early 2026, according to the latest INDEC data. Your savings in pesos lose value faster than you can replenish them. You feel like you're working harder and harder just to maintain the same standard of living. This isn't an isolated case. Over the past decade, tens of thousands of highly educated Argentinians, doctors, engineers, designers, accountants, have quietly left the country. They moved to Spain, where many have ancestral citizenship, Canada, the United States, or wherever life seems more predictable and stable. In casual conversations, they no longer say, "I'm emigrating." They say, "I'm building my future somewhere else." The same pattern repeats in dozens of other middle-income countries: Mexico City, São Paulo, Jakarta, Bangkok, Lagos, Johannesburg, Manila. Talented, hardworking young people keep hitting the same invisible wall. So the bigger, more troubling question is, why do so many countries remain stuck in poverty or a frustrating middle-income limbo, even when large numbers of their citizens are well-educated, diligent, globally connected, and working in modern industries? And why should ordinary Americans, living in one of the world's richest and most stable economies, pay attention? For decades, the dominant economic story was optimistic and straightforward. After World War II, leading economists believed that globalization would create a natural convergence. Poor countries would open their markets, welcome foreign investment, educate their people, embrace free trade, and gradually catch up with the rich world. The ladder of development seemed clear and accessible to everyone. But the real-world outcome has been far more uneven and disappointing. Many countries enjoyed impressive early growth, building highways, factories, schools, and a new middle class, only to slow dramatically or stall completely once they reached middle-income status. Roughly $8,000 to $13,000 per person per year in current dollars. Economists call this persistent stall the middle income trap. According to the World Bank's comprehensive 2024 World Development Report, still the leading reference in 2026, 108 countries, home to more than 6 billion people, are currently stuck in this middle income zone. Since 1990, only 34 countries have successfully escaped to high income status. More than one-third of those escapes happened because the country joined the European Union, for example, Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, the Baltic states, and gained access to EU markets, funds, and institutions. Others escaped thanks to major new oil or gas discoveries. The vast majority of middle-income nations, including giants like China, India, Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, Thailand, Malaysia, and South Africa, remain trapped, unable to make the final leap to high-income prosperity. Several deep structural forces explain why the trap is so persistent and difficult to escape. The overwhelming dominance of the US dollar in the global system. Almost every country needs US dollars to buy oil on international markets, import essential machinery and technology, and repay foreign loans. Most international debt is denominated in dollars. Yet no developing country controls the dollar. The US Federal Reserve does. When the Fed raised interest rates sharply from 2022 to 2023 to fight US inflation, trillions of dollars flowed back to safer American assets, treasury bonds, stocks. Emerging market currencies collapsed, dollar debts became much more expensive to service, capital fled, and economic crises erupted across Latin America, Africa, and parts of Asia. Even after the Fed began cutting rates in late 2025, bringing the target range to 3.50 to 3.75% by December, and largely paused further cuts into 2026, the fundamental vulnerability remains. A single monetary policy decision made in Washington can destabilize dozens of economies thousands of miles away. Kicking away the latter, the historical hypocrisy in global trade rules. Almost every country that is rich today, including the United States in the 19th century, used high tariffs, generous government subsidies, state-directed credit, and deliberate industrial policies to protect and nurture their infant industries until they could compete globally. Once those nations reached the top, they helped design the current international trade rules through the World Trade Organization and various bilateral agreements that make it illegal or extremely costly for today's developing countries to do the same thing. Economist Ha-Joon Chang calls this kicking away the ladder. The rich countries climbed using protectionism, then pulled the ladder up so others cannot follow. As a result, local manufacturers and farmers in middle-income countries are often overwhelmed by cheap imported goods, frequently subsidized by rich country governments before they have time to grow strong and competitive. The high technology wall, the industries that generate the highest incomes and productivity today, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, aerospace, advanced materials, quantum computing, require decades of cumulative research and development, tens or hundreds of billions in sustained investment, and tightly controlled global supply chains. Only a small number of countries, the United States, Japan, the Netherlands, Germany, Taiwan, South Korea, dominate those chains and the critical equipment. For example, extreme ultraviolet lithography machines made by ASML in the Netherlands. For most middle-income countries, breaking into these sectors is extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, in the current global rules. What does all of this mean for Americans? First, it is a powerful reminder that individual talent, education, and hard work are not always enough when the larger macroeconomic and institutional environment is deeply dysfunctional. The young engineer in Buenos Aires is not less intelligent, less disciplined, or less capable than his American counterpart. He simply lives inside a system where chronic inflation, currency volatility, external debt pressures, and structural barriers constantly erode progress. That contrast should make Americans more grateful for the relative stability the U.S. still enjoys. Headline inflation around 2.4% in early 2026, strong rule of law, deep capital markets, and more committed to protecting those foundations. Second, the global economy is far more interconnected than most people realize. U.S. Federal Reserve decisions ripple outward with enormous force. Emerging market crises triggered by dollar movements can eventually boomerang back to the United States in the form of supply chain disruptions, higher commodity prices, migration pressures, or reduced export markets. What happens in Buenos Aires, Jakarta, Lagos, or São Paulo is not someone else's problem. It eventually affects American jobs, prices, and security. Third, there is no single universal recipe for escaping poverty or the middle income trap. Different countries have succeeded through different paths: strong state-led industrial policy and export discipline. South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, deep regional integration and institutional reform. Eastern Europe, via the European Union. Or strategic use of natural resources combined with governance improvements. Some Gulf states, Botswana. Recognizing that historical timing, geography, geopolitics, and institutional quality matter enormously helps us avoid simplistic, one-size-fits-all advice like just copy the American model. The United States became the world's largest economy, not only because of free markets and innovation, but also because of early strategic protectionism, high tariffs from the 1790s to the early 20th century, massive public investments in education and infrastructure, the advantages of two vast oceans, and the geopolitical position we secured after 1945. Understanding the structural obstacles that still confront the majority of humanity should make Americans humbler, more thoughtful about trade policy, foreign aid, immigration, and global leadership, and more aware of how interconnected our prosperity really is. In the end, the global economy is not a pure meritocracy where hard work and education alone guarantee success. It is a complex, historically shaped system of rules, incentives, power, and path dependence. Seeing that system clearly does not make the world less fair. It makes us better equipped to navigate it, invest wisely, support sensible policies, and perhaps even help make it a little fairer for the next generation. If stories like the one in Buenos Aires make you think differently about the hidden forces shaping our shared world, keep exploring. The most powerful dynamics are often the ones hiding in plain sight.